You can probably already guess the topic from the title of this video. This is about Anatoly Moskvin, a man who exhumed the corpses of young girls, mummified them, and kept them in his home. He spoke to them, lived with them, and treated them like companions. But here's the strange part. It's hard to say he was mentally unstable in the typical sense. This man fluently spoke 13 languages, read thousands of books, and had the intelligence of a scholar. So why did he do what he did? Today, we'll dive deep into this disturbing and complex case. Get ready. Activate your cosmic mode of thinking, because nothing in this universe can disturb you while watching this video. Friends, in this video, we discuss a deeply disturbing and complicated topic. It's about a man with an academic background who committed unimaginable acts. Anatoly Moskvin created dolls out of corpses. Corpses he dug up with his own hands. Yes, you heard that correctly. Let's start from the beginning. Anatoly Moskvin was born on September 1, 1966. He spent his entire life in Nizhny Novgorod, the sixth largest city in Russia. From a very early age, around 3 or 4, he showed an exceptional thirst for knowledge. He quickly learned how to read, and his intellectual curiosity was noticed and supported by his parents. They did everything they could to nurture his growth. But this brilliance came at a cost. His classmates mocked and bullied him. Like many gifted children, he was misunderstood. They nicknamed him the botanist, ridiculed him, and excluded him. Anatoly grew up in loneliness, withdrawing from the outside world, and instead immersing himself in books, languages, history, and knowledge. He chose to live in his own inner universe, which may have influenced his mental state over time. According to his mother, he was a quiet, calm child. He never hurt anyone, never did anything bad. He dedicated his time to reading and learning. But school was a different story. He was constantly bullied. Despite that, he mastered 13 languages fluently and had knowledge of around 50, more to various degrees. That alone tells you how intelligent he really was. Then came a traumatic event that likely shaped the rest of his life. In 3rd grade, Anatoly suffered a psychological blow. One day, while walking past a cemetery, he saw a group of people standing around a coffin. A woman called him over and forced him to kiss the corpse of a young girl named Natasha. She even put a ring on his finger, symbolically marrying him to the dead girl. For a young boy, this was a horrifying experience. After that incident, he became obsessed with cemeteries. He started having dreams about Natasha, talking to her in his sleep. These were likely hallucinations. In his dreams, Natasha followed him everywhere. His parents took him to a doctor and it seemed like he had recovered, but in reality, it never stopped. Anatoly continued visiting Natasha's grave frequently. Throughout his life, he visited over 700 cemeteries. Years later, he began referring to himself as a necropolis expert, a specialist in graveyards. He began researching burial customs, funeral rituals, and the dead. In his room, he collected a personal library of over 60,000 books, most of them about death, history, and rituals. I often say, behind every criminal's actions, there is usually some form of trauma or mental illness. In this case, that's very clear. Anatoly was humiliated at school. Boys even pulled down his pants in public. But what left the deepest scar wasn't the bullying. You already know what it was. That traumatic marriage to the corpse as a child. During his university years, Anatoly joined an occult group called the Luciferian Society, which performed rituals involving dead animals and believed in black magic. They even had bizarre ceremonies for people who never married, calling them dinner for the unmarried. Anatoly was also known to avoid drinking and smoking. Though most Russians identify with Christianity, Anatoly rejected the faith entirely. He called himself a pagan, embracing ancient spiritual beliefs instead. It must be said, Moskvin was an exceptionally knowledgeable person from a scientific standpoint. He taught university classes and gave lectures all across Ukraine. In 2011, the police conducted a search of the apartment he shared with his parents, as well as his garage. What they found shocked the world. They discovered 26 large dolls. Some sources say 28, but these were not ordinary dolls. They were the mummified remains of young girls, exhumed from cemeteries and preserved by Moskvin. He referred to them as his idols. He worked on them only when he was home alone. He was highly selective about which graves he chose to disturb. He sometimes monitored certain graves for a while. If a body didn't fit, he could rebury it. He only chose girls and young women for his work. When asked, "How did you dig them up?" Moskvin replied, "I simply liked them. I used to sleep in cemeteries. I tried to establish contact with the graves. At first, I only exhumed those I felt I could communicate with. Later, to better understand this communication, I began exhuming more bodies for experimentation." He often hid the corpses temporarily near the cemetery in secret spots. There, over several weeks, he would balsam and mummify them. Once dried, he would decide, return them to the grave, or keep them preserved. The dolls were kept inside his home, and there were many. Perhaps the most disturbing detail, Moskvin hollowed out each doll's chest area, creating compartments in which he placed personal items connected to the girl's life, like soap pieces, hospital tags, and other symbols from their past. You might wonder, how did he know anything about the girls' lives? He would get their names from the coffins, then research them. He visited their schools and even spoke to parents to learn about how they had died. Some of the dolls had mechanisms inside. Pressing a button would play children's songs or school music. He did this to make them seem more lifelike. After his arrest, all the corpses were sent for forensic analysis, but that wasn't all the police found. In his apartment, there were also human remains, like a woman's leg stuffed inside a large sock, body parts, skulls, and 2 large boxes filled with human bones. And one more thing. To make the doll's eyes appear more natural, he installed glass eyes. He painted them, dressed them, gave some headphones. He did everything to make them appear real. Moskvin explained his actions in surprisingly simple terms. He wanted a daughter. He couldn't have children of his own. He participated in the so-called Dinner for the Unmarried, a pagan ceremony, and had no romantic relationships with women. When asked, "Do you really want a child?" he replied, "Yes, I wanted a daughter more than anything. I dreamed of teaching her everything I know. I have an enormous library, but my parents were against it. They said I couldn't handle it. Then money problems, lack of a partner, life pressures. It all added up. But I never cared about money. I only cared about what I found meaningful and interesting." Earlier, I mentioned that he was also a university lecturer. Some of his students later came forward. One said, "I knew him personally. Once, our study group went to his apartment to prepare for a test. We were warned beforehand. This guy's weird. Be careful." When we got there, the apartment was filled with life-sized dolls. It was disturbing. One of his former students once said, "He told us those dolls were needed for certain rituals." He seemed calm, soft-spoken, and very intelligent, but still, we tried not to get too close. In the end, only 2 or 3 students ever kept in touch with him. Now think about this. How do you store 26 large, life-sized dolls in a tiny apartment? The answer, he didn't collect them all at once. Moskvin gathered his collection slowly over the course of 10 years. Most of them were kept in his bedroom. Only one, the one he named Masha, was placed in his parents' bedroom. Here's the strange part. His mother never suspected anything. Guests who came over actually complimented the dolls, calling them beautiful and unique. His mother, Vera, later said, "From the outside, they looked just like dolls. You couldn't tell they were preserved corpses. There was no smell. They looked completely normal. Nothing strange about them." Still, she admitted she was disturbed by the way Anatoly spoke to the dolls as if they were alive, especially how he named one Masha and placed her at the dining table during meals. In Moskvin's mind, Each doll had its own personality and story. His obsession with academic research made this seem, in his mind, more like a cultural study than a crime. After all, he once studied the history of dolls in depth. Perhaps that academic interest is what led him down this twisted path. He created his first doll after a woman named Elvira. A hairdresser visited their home. Something triggered inside him that day, and he began taking his obsession seriously from that point on. When asked, "What did you do with them at home?" he replied, "We talked. We had our own world. We had our own language, our own holidays, our own music. Each doll had its place. Each one had its own soul." Even though he lived with his parents, he only interacted with the dolls when no one was home. He kept everything hidden. During the trial, Moskvin openly described his embalming techniques, how much salt he used, the exact mixtures, and how many days were needed to fully dry the body. Creating just one mummy could take a whole year, he said. And despite all this, there was no odor in the apartment. No one suspected anything. Even his mother acted strangely. Moskvin brought home wedding dresses and children's clothes from the streets, saying they were for his dolls. His mother washed and ironed them without asking questions. At trial, Anatoly admitted that he knew what he was doing was a crime, but he said he felt compassion for the children. He even said, "I didn't want them to stay in the grave. As a result of the investigation, 8 police officers carried out a full search of Anatoly Moskvin's apartment and garage. It was during that search that they uncovered 26 life-size dolls, the preserved bodies of young girls. In May 2012, Moskvin's trial took place. At that time, he was officially declared legally insane. The court acquitted him of criminal responsibility and instead ordered mandatory psychiatric treatment. At first, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital for 6 months, but after every 6 months, the court kept extending his treatment. Each time, doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia. What about his mother? How did she feel about all this? During the trial, she made vague and conflicting statements, saying that had she known, she would have acted differently. But here's the thing. Whether she knew or didn't, either way, she bears some responsibility. If she knew, she was an accomplice. If she didn't, it shows neglect toward her own child. But legally, only one of those makes her accountable. Regardless, at the trial, she admitted if he were released, he would do it again. And so, the court ruled that there were no grounds to release him. Moskvin himself even said, "Don't return my girls to me. If I could, I would have put them back where they came from." After this horrific case went public, everyone turned their backs on the family, friends, relatives, neighbors. No one wanted to associate with them anymore. And honestly, who would want to be the friend or relative of someone who did something like this? Today, Moskvin is on 15 different medications. They slow his movements. He speaks very slowly. Sometimes his eyes roll backward, he can't write, and even his mouth barely moves. He spends most of the day sleeping. He doesn't talk to anyone. He's completely disconnected. And just recently, in May 2025, the court extended his treatment once again because he is still considered dangerous to society. If you've made it to the end of this video, leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you don't know what to say, just flood the comment section with stickers. That's fine too. I appreciate all of you. Take care of yourselves. Until next time, goodbye.